Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high-functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. I have no qualifications or certifications. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. You can find Bluntly Bipolar at bluntlybipolar.com or about any podcast distribution service. Listener discretion is advised for heavy topics related to mental health, including suicide, self-harm, and more. Over the years, I've had several people tell me they wish I could talk to someone they cared about. I can't do that for everyone, but what I can do is create a piece of content that can be shared with someone you care about. This is episode 5, an open letter to the hopeless. Do you know hopelessness? Do you know that pitch black emptiness? A place so dark that it's like being buried in a tomb under the Marianas Trench? A place so dark that you can't see your hand in front of your face even millimeters away. It's such an ugly place to sit. I remember the times when I was sitting in that darkness, and I would hear suicide prevention and outreach efforts, and it would just reinforce my bitterness. I'd find myself drowning in sadness or rage, or even worse, total emptiness. And there were several occasions where it would kick off my suicidal ideation again. Ain't that about a bitch? I never talked about it too much while I was in it, because the times I did, I would inadvertently reinforce my own loneliness and emptiness. People tell you things like, have hope, things will get better. Really? Because they didn't for years. In fact, they got much worse. Or they tell you, you need Jesus, you need to pray. All right. I mean, that didn't work the first 10,000 times when I was desperate for relief from my mental illness. But sure, maybe the 10,001st time will be different. Every time I would see some message of hope like that, it would just reinforce my mental isolation, because it was clear that they didn't understand. And how could you unless you found yourself in that submerged tomb too? My bipolar depression started when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I had my first active suicide attempt at 15 during depressive psychosis, when I put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger on a bullet that didn't go off. In the years that followed, I put myself in a position to die many times, and I self-harmed in a variety of ways just so I could feel something for a little while. I stepped in and out of that mental space multiple times until I was diagnosed in 2009. I had another depressive psychotic break that forced me to make a decision, either end myself or talk to a professional. And before I went in to talk to that professional, I had made the decision that if they found nothing wrong with me, I would end myself that evening. I was terrified I would act on what was going on in my head while I was disconnected from reality, while I was deep in psychosis. That all being said, would you believe me if I told you there is hope? That there is a spark of light in that pitch black, even if you can't see it? Just a small flame of hope that I couldn't see at the time because I didn't know where to look. Because that mental space is so difficult, so oppressive, it distorts so much that it's so easy to overlook that small light that still persists. I was spending so much time looking forward, looking around, trying to find a way out, trying to take a breath, just trying to survive, that I couldn't see that small flame in that pitch black. And that light is you. That light is me. Because I was still alive. And I'm still here. Even though it's still oppressively dark, I'm still here. People always tell you to think about your loved ones or your future or whatever to try and push those thoughts away, but they don't ever really remind you that you are valuable. You are the reason to keep going, because you deserve to know peace and happiness, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of what life or other people have made you believe about yourself. But it's hard to believe that when you can't see anything and you can't seem to make any progress. So I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts and strategies for surviving and escaping my tomb. Once you're out, maybe someday you'll do the same thing for someone else trapped and drowning. I'm not saying that these things will work for you, but they're a place to start. The important thing is to keep trying. Before I do, I'd like to remind you that I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone who lived in that tomb for years. That mental space stuck me in survival mode. My brain would oscillate between scrambling to survive and being too exhausted to think, sprinkled with a liberal amount of rage. Sometimes that was bipolar escalation. Other times it was just the changing flavors of the depression. When I was stuck in that mode, it is impossible for me to conceptualize the future at all, sometimes even the next 5 minutes. So how can you have hope when you can't see a different tomorrow? Well-meaning people always tell us things like, oh, things will get better, but they don't know that. They have no idea about that, and they have no idea how long you've been trying to not drown in that tomb. I mean, it didn't get better for years, only worse. So why would it spontaneously get better tomorrow? But there is one undeniable concrete truth that I relied on when trying to find my will to survive, to dig up enough energy to be stubborn and spiteful at my brain trying to destroy me. And that truth is, everything changes with time. Everything. Now, does that mean the change will be good? No. What it does mean is that my situation will change in some way sooner or later, just as sure as the sun will rise and set. And as long as I'm still alive, I can try to improve it. Furthermore, I always look at bipolar disorder as an almost like a promise of sorts. Because before it was bipolar disorder, it was manic depression. And before it was manic depression, it was the circular disease. And it almost promises that things will get different because sooner or later, the cycle is going to change. You may not be able to see it. It may take a while. But sooner or later, it's going to change. But how can you try to improve it? Well, the answer is different for everyone. But let's consider a general strategy just to give you an idea of where to start. My first step was the acknowledgement that I would need a therapist. Need a therapist. I don't know how tuned in others are to this, but I feel like there's been a large unintended consequence of the normalization of trauma and acceptance of mental illness. That the average person really underestimates just how complicated it is. Trauma is a fragile thing, and mishandling it can break you in entirely new and exciting ways. But outreach efforts don't have room for that nuance, really. What do they say? Talk to someone about it, without any kind of consideration on whether or not the person you're talking to can handle what you're showing them safely. Not only that, you may not be able to judge on whether or not that person is a safe person. Because if you open yourself up with that vulnerability, you're giving them a direct line of sight to hurt you in the most serious of ways, the kind of ways that can push you to a suicide attempt. Catharsis from being heard, I think, feels nice based on how I've seen other people respond to it. But as someone on the autistic spectrum, my social processes are kind of a mess, and I don't feel catharsis from being heard like some folks do. However, catharsis in being heard is not going to heal the root issue. It's not going to teach you ways to manage what's going on in your head or provide you informed, educated, peer-reviewed, and tested support. Someone listening isn't going to help you if you need medication to function in a healthier way or you have trauma that's rewired your brain at a base level. And if you're in this kind of mental space, it's an intense and difficult place to be in. It's a complicated place where someone who doesn't know what they're doing can inadvertently harm you. And yes, I know there are plenty of bad mental health professionals out here, but hear me when I tell you, it's the least worst option out of mostly bad choices. Now, at the start of my journey, if I listened to people who were giving me well-meaning advice, I would probably be dead right now. The average person, your loved ones or friends, if you're fortunate enough to have people that care in your life, are not equipped, educated, or trained to handle something this intense and heavy. Then you have a common belief that, oh, talking about it isn't going to fix anything. That's not an accurate take. The issue is how people look at therapy. You're paying a professional to help provide you with a medical treatment. It's not happy hour, a social brunch, or some kind of happy social brunch hour. All right? Talk therapy is a medical treatment. Trying to open up to friends and families can actually be quite harmful to you. You also have the additional consideration of, is that person emotionally healthy and responsible enough to carry your pain gently and protect it? And frankly, most people are not emotionally intelligent enough for that. Or worse, they just may weaponize it against you later when they want to hurt you. Like many men, I made the mistake of being vulnerable with the wrong people and having it used against me later. God forbid anyone see you cry or be emotional, then all of a sudden you're less of a man for, having emotions. But somehow being emotionless is what defines strength, when really it's not strong at all. It's weakness, because it's a rejection of the truth. It's even worse if you find yourself in the trad or podcast brosphere because they encourage anger and hopelessness. You can't build hope, positivity, or happiness in uninformed anger. It doesn't work that way. Believe me, I fucking know. Yes, there's lots of things to be angry about in the world, a lot of reasons to be hopeless, but that's because the anger is so loud and so dark that it's so hard to notice that flicker of light, of hope. It just drowns it all out. But then you may be thinking, well, therapy isn't going to fix me. Well, again, what do you mean by fixed? Because that's a difficult word in the context of mental wellness. Are you under the impression that you can go through years of pain, suffering, turmoil, illness, and not come out of it at least a little bit damaged? A lot of people do think that. And it's something I attribute to the ongoing normalization of trauma and mental illness, that we can live a life just like everybody else if we just get treatment. And that's not necessarily true. It's a comforting lie that we're told with the good intention of trying to get less of us to kill ourselves. Some may argue that it's a white lie, but I don't know if the people who push those messages understand how devastating false hope can be. Not every problem is totally fixable. However, many of them can either be made smaller so they're easier to carry, or made manageable through strategies and treatments that have been shown to work for other people with similar issues. Does that mean it'll be perfect? No. It's like breaking a mirror and gluing it back together. Yeah, it can function as a mirror again, but it'll never be like before the break happened, or as if it never happened at all. And it may crack more in the future, so you have to glue some more pieces back together. Treatment and healing doesn't mean your problems disappear completely. For example, consider if Kevin's husband kills himself, then develops PTSD from it. He has constant anxiety of someone else he loves killing themselves. He can't sleep without dreaming about finding his body, and he starts having panic attacks, among other things. Now, that's a trauma and pain that's always going to be there in some way. Losing someone you love to suicide is like having a piece of your soul carved out. Grieving with the help of a certified grief counselor doesn't mean you're going to be just fine after the fact. Instead, it's more like reducing the weight of it all until it's something that's just a little easier to carry. And I would add that reducing your own suffering doesn't mean that you love them any less than you did before. But you're still alive, and they're not. And we have to find a way to keep living. You will always love them, and you will always care, and always carry some bit of that pain with you, no matter how much progress you make. I promise you don't need to worry about that. Escapism doesn't work. That just punts the problem further down the road, so it has time to get worse before it comes back around to remind you it's still there. People try to escape the black metal space in so many unhealthy ways. Drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, self-harm, working all the time, or packing their schedules so full of events they don't have time to think about it. Exercise is another common form of escapism promoted in male spaces. Bro, I just need to hit the gym so I can feel better about myself. The steel is my therapy. And you know what? There's truth to that. Exercise provides a number of health benefits, including helping to regulate one's nervous system. But what it won't do is resolve and heal the core problems or trauma you've experienced. For example, if you were abused as a child, hitting the gym isn't going to fix things like trust and attachment issues. That's the kind of thing you need talk therapy for. And look, I know that finding the right therapist fucking sucks. I've had a few that I wouldn't trust to guide me to the mailbox, let alone through the depths of my mental illness and trauma. It sucks. The system sucks. Quality can be spotty. A lot of professionals in social and mental health are underpaid and overworked. So how could they provide quality service when they're, qualify for food stamps or working multiple jobs and can't afford therapy themselves. But it's still the least worst option out of mostly bad choices that people like us have. People who are carrying some serious, deep problems that can't be addressed by just talking to someone. I mean, I'm not going to ask a friend about my heart health, right? And the brain is an infinitely more complicated thing than the cardiovascular system. I mean, as far as I know, I could be wrong. I'm going to be blunt here. Even if you've had bad experiences with the system or mental health professionals, you just have to keep trying. You have to keep trying until you can connect with someone that you feel like you can trust. Rest if you're frustrated and you have to, but you'll have to try again. It's not going to go away on its own. It's not going to get better on its own. And in fact, in a lot of cases, it just gets harder to treat the longer you wait. I know times are hard for a lot of folks right now. Access to mental health care is a privilege that a lot of people don't have. But if you can get in to talk to a mental health professional, that's the best step you can take. If you're poor or unemployed, look into local services through crisis lines. Ask at your local community services office or call around to local medical facilities. Ask if they can point you in the right direction. I know where I live, the local job and family center will hand out printouts of local charities with their phone numbers and contact information, so to make it easier for you to find things. You know, there's a lot of back-end services that the general public doesn't necessarily know about where you may be able to get help. For example, I was unemployed when I looked for help, and the help I received came from grants from Catholic charities, and I didn't have to pay for any of it because of the program. And the way that worked is when they would get an uninsured patient, they basically notify the handler organization for funding. So if you're on the patient side of things, you never know that kind of thing existed. If nothing else, see if you can get a referral from a general or nurse practitioner. They may be able to point you in the right direction. And if you need something to look forward to, try to look forward to that, to the first steps on a new journey. I know that after I had that psychotic break, my screening appointment was the only piece of hope I could find at the time. I would remind myself that yes, this may give me the answers that I need to help me understand what's going on. It's progress. And the sooner we get to it, the sooner we can find some healing and create some peace and happiness for ourselves. Now, I'm not special. There's nothing I did that you can't do too. So many people have told me over the years that I'm so strong and special, but I'm not. I tried to end my suffering multiple times when I was at my worst. I used drugs, I did shitty things to people, I did shitty things to myself, self-harmed, and several other regrettable things. But I'm still here. And so are you. Whatever the reason you don't feel you're strong, capable, or worthy enough pales in comparison to the fact that you are still here and that you are a spark of light in your darkness. I've been so privileged to speak with folks who have survived so many ugly things, and I wish you and all of them could see their light too. And as I close out this open letter, I'll leave you with an amusing story and a final bit of informal advice. If you've never been to therapy before, there's a getting to know you phase at the beginning where the therapist is usually asking you a bunch of questions to better understand why you're there and what help you need. Now, I'm autistic, and as many autistics do, I often hear things literally as opposed to contextually. So during one such interview phase, she asked, "Do you have any plans to commit suicide?" Now, what she was actually asking in the context of our meeting was, do you have any immediate plans to commit suicide that you are in danger of acting on, so I know whether or not you need to go inpatient? But that's not what I heard. Instead, what I heard was literally, do you have any plans to commit suicide? And I answered something to the effect of, well, yeah, I've been living with bipolar depression for decades now. Of course I do. I have like 100. I wish I had a picture of the expression on her face when I said that. And being autistic, I didn't immediately recognize the emotion she was conveying in her facial expression. We stared at each other for about 10 seconds until I realized, oh shit, that is not what she was asking. No immediate plans or intent. I do not need to be inpatient. And I share that to say, if you are worried about being forced inpatient, what they look for is intention, plans, and means of happening in the near future. Just saying you have suicidal ideation is not enough. Every place I've ever been to has had some kind of pamphlet or paperwork that would outline mandatory reporting practices when they need to involuntarily commit you. So familiarize yourself with their policies. Don't be a dumbass like me and answer like I did implying that you do have an actionable plan in mind, or 100, unless you do have immediate plans. So in the 5 or more years that I've done talk therapy, off and on, I've talked about my suicidal ideation numerous times. They aren't looking to just toss you in and throw away the key. If you're unsure of their policies, ask for a copy of the information. They will give it to you. And I think that's where I'll leave you for now. And this is where I'm supposed to tell you to have hope and that things will get better. But I don't know that for sure. And I don't believe in spreading false hope. What I do know is that what I've shared with you in this episode is what helped me survive and claw my way out of this fucking tomb. And I hope to see you on the surface soon. Thank you for spending your time with me. Don't forget to hit subscribe on the way out and share this with someone who you think it might benefit.